In today's episode of the Pathfund Presents podcast, I got a very interesting guest here with me today. I'm with no other than the head of demand generation at Lunio, Leonardo Pizarro, and he's hailing over here from the folks at Lunio. You've probably heard about Lunio in the recent days. They've, number one, raised quite a significant Series A round not too long ago and have been big in the space of click fraud prevention, protection. They basically stop click fraud everywhere. That's the tagline on their website. And today we want to deep dive into what Lunio is all about, but also how Leo is thinking about growth for the company. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Lucas.
Very good. So Leo, give us a brief overview. What is Lunio all about for the people who haven't heard about it yet?
Yep. So I guess Lunio is a SaaS platform that eliminates all fake touch points from your marketing funnel with the ultimate goal to drive marketing efficiency. And that is the tagline that we're actually going ahead with. Click fraud is a part of that, but our mission is much bigger than that. So ultimately, our mission is pretty much to fight the fake web and eliminate bad traffic across the internet when you're running campaigns.
Very good. Very good. So so who would you say is ideally suited in using Lunio? Like who are best? I mean, is there a certain amount of sort of ad traffic that I should be getting? Is there a certain ad spend where it starts to make sense to work with you guys? Like what is the sweet spot?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say, I mean, most people would benefit from a solution that prevents click fraud. Typically, what we see from our clients is that around 11% of total traffic is invalid coming from campaigns. This is 11% in total. If you look at programmatic display, that can range between 15 to 25%. So that's 15 to 25% of your budget being wasted on fake traffic. So really, I guess the most advertisers that would benefit from the solution would be advertisers spending over $100,000 per month minimum, I'd say.
Makes sense. And what about smaller players? Do they still see benefit?
So yeah, exactly. So smaller players can see some benefits. I think it is on a trial basis, and this really depends on the market you're in. I know that in terms of our target market and the sophistication of our solution, we typically work with mid-market enterprise companies. So overall, the internet has gotten a lot more sophisticated. Automated attacks are now built to circumvent basic defensive measures. So when you think of non-human traffic from before, you'd think of maybe a scraper bot that you could identify within your weblog. Whereas right now you have these bots that would fake a user age and pretty much mimic user behavior just to try and emulate an attack. And usually that attack is for monetary, with a monetary incentive.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Now, very good. So who would you say within those organizations is sort of the person that picks up on a solution like that, right? I mean, obviously marketers are well versed in spending on, Google, Meta, LinkedIn, TikTok, and the likes, but who has that foresight, that thinking to actually remove at least all those wrong clicks, basically. That would be who has the foresight for that?
Yeah, great question. So it's interesting that you asked that because we have seen the market shift lately. Typically, it would be performance marketers, so people that are hands-on with the tool. They'd get insights into their analytics, and you would often see that something is not quite right. Especially when you're looking at, let's say, your analytics on an ad platform like Google, comparing that with Google Analytics, your site platform, and then maybe comparing that with your weblog. So you're seeing that there is a data discrepancy between each. So ultimately, we're trying to close that data gap. In terms of from a decision-making point of view, you're now looking at more C-level individuals to the point where at times we do get C-level individuals reaching out to us. So typically the CMO, the CEO, if it has to do with optimizing for efficiency, we typically get a direct message from these individuals just from having seen our brand message and what we can do for the business.
I see. Now, the interesting part is obviously how do you guys think about growth, right? I mean, I think you guys have been, maybe it's just me, but was around quite a bit, Lunio. I think even on YouTube. I'm not entirely sure, but I've definitely seen a lot of more on ClickFraud, industry at least, out on ClickFraud on different channels. Now, how do people learn about Lunio these days? Like, what's the channels that they're going through in order to get started?
Yeah, so I guess we're looking at different types of audiences here. The people that are already aware of the brand, I mean, naturally that would have come from having a problem in the first place. They would typically search for click fraud, as you would. From an SEO and paid search perspective, we hold a fairly large market share. So we're pretty much visible every time you would search for click fraud, invalid traffic coming from Google Ads. If you do have a specific pain point around that, Lunio should be there. What's more interesting is the wider tangible market. So as a performance marketer that maybe is not aware of click fraud, you might be searching for other resources in your space. And that is part of the growth strategy we're focusing on. So our goal is really to help these individuals be better at what they do in terms of offering valuable resources. So we're at a point where we're reaching out to individuals that are just looking to learn a little bit more around Google Ads, looking to take their campaigns to the next step, keeping themselves updated with monthly trends. Lunio is now having a larger presence towards that area. Gotcha.
I mean, there's a lot of noise obviously out there, right? Specifically, marketers are being often bombarded with messages. Like, what have you found to be a good way of thinking, or a good approach to think to cut through the chase? Like, what have you in mind in order to be able to actually reach them? Is that very clear value proposition? Is that, as you were saying, delivering that initial value through reports? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so my perspective, I'd probably offer an interesting analogy here. It's the same as you would do a social media post. If anyone has ever done a social media post on LinkedIn, Twitter, you'd have to put some thought behind whatever you're going to post, because it is a hyper competitive environment. Even if you have, I don't know, a decent amount of followers, these people are being bombarded, constantly bombarded by content. So the main things that really stood out for me, and I found some correlation between this, is the same format as you would have a social post would be the same that you would typically have on a landing page. You would lead on with a hook, something that is attention grabbing, that everyone, the broader audience, would understand. So it needs to be concise without jargon. You need to elaborate on that further. And this is typically pressing on a pain point or whatever you think that audience finds interesting. And then the third bit is really delivering on those key valuables. So one of the things that we've seen a shift on, but I don't think a lot of marketing teams are doing, is delivering that value first, whereas instead they're hiding it behind a form, or maybe not being as transparent on their website. So what we're seeing right now is a lot of brands are being a lot more transparent with the content they're publishing. Metadata have a great example of a demand generation conference that they launched, where every single webinar piece was left ungated with their slides shared. And I think that is the end goal of what most businesses should be doing.
And what would you tell marketers that sort of, because obviously that's been like ungating content has been, actually a lot of marketers have been sort of starting to talk about it on the show. What would you recommend to a marketer then who still kind of wants to, bring in results, let's say, into the business? What are different metrics or a different way of thinking about success that you would, present to them?
Yeah, so I guess everything starts with the position, as in what position your company is in, or your product, elaborating on that message for the audience, and then that translates into content. And ultimately, what's the goal of that content? Is it to inform? Is it to convert? Is it looking to generate revenue? I think you'd find that most of these objectives, they can only be reached if you do offer those freely. So it's a mindset shift, rather than thinking of, I'd be losing maybe 10% of the visits that would actually fill in the form on this page. Whereas now you're getting that 90% of users that are all seeing that valuable content. So you now have a much bigger audience that's being obviously receiving that content for free. And then from a remarketing perspective, you have a lot more leverage over that. So in terms of personalized touch points, I know that's something that Postmark does. It's something that you could really double down on. So think of it as a PLG strategy, but for content.
Very good. Now, a topic that has been coming up on the show, recently more and more is the cookieless future, right? So cookies, third-party cookies, starting to get out of the browser for retargeting in particular. That's going to be a topic. Google is pushing it back, like obviously like end of 2023, maybe 2024. What's your take on the cookieless future? Like, what is that something you guys already internally discuss? Do you in the marketing circles, is that a topic you guys are looking at already, or is that sort of on the back burner considering Google is pushing it out a bit?
Yeah, so it's definitely something that we've probably discussed it too much at a point where we've just, shoved it aside, accepted the fate as it is. I think that Google are wise pushing this back in terms of this cookieless future from their end. I don't think that's happening anytime soon. However, I do think that marketers need to make the shift towards focusing on first-party data. So first-party data, being the data that you actually own, that's the data that you would get most value from. It's not just data that you own, but it's in terms of accuracy, you get a lot more insights into that data. So you know that data is yours, you can validate it. Whereas third-party data, if you think of, let's say, intent signals based on some kind of third-party metric, what does that actually mean? You might be actually targeting the wrong audience based on that. So I'd say first-party data in terms of website retargeting, even down to a personal branding level. So people that follow you on let's say social media, that would be an example of first-party data. So you have a first-party pool of users that you could tap into.
Would you mind to break that down? Because I can already see, marketers maybe who are even a bit earlier in their career to say, what does it mean? Like, what should we do now, first party? What should I do different as a marketer going into that world where first party data becomes more relevant? Is there like 2 or 3 things you would recommend people to do?
Yeah. So I guess from a cookieless approach, the focus would really be rather than trying to capitalize on, let's say, fake intent signals, really focusing on the context within each platform separately. So I guess a bit of context on this is most ad platforms, they're becoming like walled gardens. So Facebook has its own privacy regulations. In order to be private and stay away from using third-party cookies, it can't share that data with other platforms, as an example. But what you can be doing better is the advertising, the campaigns that you're running on Facebook, that can be specific to Facebook, specific to how the audience interacts on that platform. Whereas typically you would see, let's say, a campaign being executed on 3, 4, 5 platforms, all with the same message and the same tactics. I think that marketers are going to be a lot more strategic with how they use LinkedIn as an individual platform versus Facebook.
Very cool. Super interesting. Now, since you're heading up growth for Lunio, what is something that you're excited about when it comes to growth? Is there any channels, any sort of, maybe even it's some tactics, even strategies that you feel, really you want to bring to the table, or even at least explore yourself personally? What have you been thinking about recently?
Yeah, so happy to elaborate on that. Had a conversation on that recently. So the vision for Lunio, the growth strategy, is really focused on 3 things. Valuable content. So value add content is going to be guides, webinars. We'll try to keep everything ungated and free to access for most people. Free tools is the second pillar. So by free tools, I mean, these are going to be calculators, templates that you can use, dashboards that you could use to plug in your data. And again, this will be free to use. So seeing this as an acquisition channel to bring in more users. But the real acquisition channel here is the word of mouth. So we're bringing in more users. We don't necessarily need to know exactly who they are, but they will be sharing our content. They will be talking about our content because you now have a much larger audience that sees the true value of Lunio. And then the third bit, and this is probably one bit that I'm very excited about, is potentially building a community. So we've seen the rise of communities in the marketing world. You can have niche communities, you can have broader communities. We're looking into that at the moment just because we have a large partner network, a very big customer base, and we've had a lot of interest around customers wanting a little bit more. So rather than just diving into the solution, they actually want to learn a little bit more around how does Lunio use Lunio? Or how do other marketers think? What are your other clients seeing in the same industry? So we want to get like-minded individuals together to be able to share those tactics. And I don't think, competition should often be, let's hide this away from these guys because okay, they're also in retail. I think that it should actually be collaborative, especially in the age that we're in, where we're focusing on efficiency. And I think we could do a lot better if we shared some more knowledge on what's working and what's not.
Yeah, you brought up the word efficiency there. Maybe I want to take that as sort of, the last topic before we moving into slowly wrapping up the interview for today. You mentioned the efficiency, and of course, in these current terms, efficiency becomes more and more important for teams. Like, what are like 2 or 3 things you would say marketers can do to actually, put themselves in that efficiency mindset? What is, obviously, saving on false clicks would be one thing. Maybe give us a bit of context.
Yeah, so I guess eliminating wasted spend, absolutely, that's on the list. You've heard of the term demand generation, demand capture tactics. So making sure that you have the right ratio. And by right ratio is if there is enough demand in the market, you should be focusing on capturing that demand and capitalizing on it. That is probably the less resource intensive activity that you could be doing. So a great example is leveraging paid search, one of the very few paid inbound channels that you could be using to capitalize on that interest. Also, a lot of brands think that just because there's not someone searching for a problem or searching for my brand, that means that you don't have demand. You could actually argue that you can tap into other search terms and think as your audience thinks to try and generate demand for that. So a great example is people might not be looking for click fraud, but they might be looking for ways to optimize their marketing funnel, in which case we would hit them with that tactic. I would say that paid search has been around for a while, but I still feel that it's underutilized, and in most cases it can generate the best ROI.
Very good. Very cool. Leo, I really appreciate you took the time with us today to be a guest on Pathmark Presents. I want to slowly wrap it up with our very last question, right? If today would be your very first day joining Lunio, what's the one thing or one advice that you would give yourself?
The one advice I would give myself. That's a good question. Let me see. First day joining. So I'll probably say, looking back at when I joined, I was pretty agile as you would with most startups, coming in, wanting to change everything. This is an advice that I would give to anyone starting in a company is to always start that first week by taking a step back and observing. As much as you do want to make changes straight away and you do see things that you want to fix, take a step back, observe, see how things are done. And I think this is playing it out more strategically. And then for a week or two, try to obviously build those relationships out, and then you'll be in a better position to execute that strategy.
Leo, thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathmark Presents.
All right. Thanks for having me, Lucas.